Historical Commission, conducting interviews with community members and publishing books about the area. Her interest in oral history originated with the North Cambridge project, for which she interviewed 60 neighborhood residents, including, what was his name?
Tip O'Neill.
Tip O'Neill. Big deal, Tip O'Neill. When she retired in 2015, she started working on what would become this wonderful book, Coming Out, Becoming Ourselves. Yeah, which you're here to talk about tonight, which has lesbian stories from the Boston Daughters of Bilitis. And so, if I do say so myself, in the book, Sarah really skillfully blends together personal narratives with broader historical context about the time. So it's truly a wonderful book and so important right now. As Sarah notes in the preface, she quotes, "If we are erased from the history books, how can we ever know what we are?" So please welcome Sarah Boyer. Yes, we're just gonna have a few questions about the book and then open it up to the audience as well. But starting back at the beginning, could you please tell us more about the origin story for the book and how it came about?
Sure. Well, can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. In 2015, I retired from the Historical Commission in Cambridge, and I was going to this lesbian brunch in Roslindale, and Lois Johnson came up to me, and she introduced herself, and she said, "You know, I really would like you to help me interview lesbians who were in the Daughters of Bilitis." And I looked at her like, Daughters of Bilitis? I don't know what this is. And so she explained it to me, and I will explain it to you. But at any rate, Lois offered to have me come help her and help her learn how to interview, and so I agreed to do it because I was retired, but I didn't want to stop working. So we got together and we tried to find the contacts for the Daughters of Bilitis, but it had been out of existence for like 15 years. So her contacts were all out of date. So it took us 5 years to interview 25 women. And in that time, we covered, we had to look up people all over the place, and it took us a long time to do that. But anyway, 2020, Lois was very sick. We did manage to do our last interview with Zach Sullivan down in Florida. We did it on a video, and Lois died in 2020. And she had told me before that she wanted a book of the interviews. And so after she died, I thought, well, I don't know if I'm gonna do this or not. And then I thought about Lois, and I thought about how wonderful she was. She was an incredible woman, and she taught me so much. And I decided that I did have to do the book. So there were five years of us interviewing, and then there were 4 years of me putting it together. And maybe we could talk about that, but not now.
Yeah, we could do a little play-by-play of each month of those 4 years, what we were working on. So you said when Lois first approached you, you hadn't heard of the Daughters of Bilitis.
Right.
And for anyone else who is unfamiliar, could you share more about the beginnings of
Sure.
DOB in San Francisco?
Yeah. So. What? Oh, thank you. This is a picture of Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, who were along with 3 other lesbian couples, were the founders of the Daughters of Bilitis in San Francisco in 1955, if you can imagine that. And they knew 3 other lesbian couples, and they didn't know too many more, because you either had to go to a bar, you had to take chances on going to a bar because you could get arrested, even in San Francisco. And people were not out at all. So they were having meetings about trying to find new members for the Daughters of Bilitis. And one of the members said at the meeting, we should call ourselves the Daughters of Bilitis. And everybody said, what's that? Well, Bilitis was a mythical figure who was Sappho's lover on the Isle of Lesbos. And this man, it was a man, Pierre Louis, he wrote a poetry, erotic poetry about, I'm sorry, why am I drawing a blank? About, Bilitis and Sappho. So, this woman, Nancy, she said, well, we can call ourselves the Daughters of Bilitis, and if anybody asks what we are, we'll say we're a Greek poetry club. So that's how they started out, and they recruited a lot of people, and about a year after that, they started a magazine called The Ladder, and through that magazine, they were able to reach lesbians in the United States and all over the world, eventually. So it was very popular. So that's, yeah.
And then, so it wasn't until '69 that the Boston chapter sprung up.
Yep.
Could you talked a little bit more about, being a lesbian in the 50s, where, similar bar raids and whatnot. Could you talk more about kind of setting the stage for the Boston chapter and what it kind of sprung up from in the 70s and whatnot?
Sure. Well, there was a woman, Jan Chase, who was living in Boston, and she subscribed to The Ladder. And she decided, The Ladder was putting it out that they wanted to have more chapters all over the country of the Daughters of Bilitis. And so Jan Chase decided that she wanted to form an organization in Boston. So she and someone else went down to New York to talk to the people who already had the New York Daughters of Bilitis. And she just happened to go down there at the time of the Stonewall Uprising. She didn't know anything about it, but she went back to Boston and she started the Daughters of Bilitis. And they didn't know how to really recruit people, but they tried to put an ad in the Boston Globe, and the Boston Globe wouldn't take it.
Oh.
So then they put an ad in the Boston After Dark, and that was like a semi-underground newspaper at the time. And they had to be really careful about what they said. They said they didn't mention any phone numbers or anybody's name, just a P.O. box, just write to us. But from there, they really got a lot of members. And so 1969 to 1972, they had a couple of presidents. And then Lois Johnson and Sherry Barden, right here, this is them on their 57th wedding anniversary. Lois asked Sherry to run for president, and Sherry she actually got it. She was elected president, and she was not good at it. She would say anything she wanted to say. She just was right out there. If anybody knew Sherry Barden, that's who she was. But anyway, so Sherry the next year said, Lois, you've got to run. And Lois took over, and she won, and she ran the organization for 20 years. And she was just the right person for the job.
Speaking more about their leadership style, running it for 20 years, I mean, it ran for 30 years total, the Boston chapter, so that's like the last good chunk of it. What principles of community organization do you think helped the Boston chapter last so long?
Well, back then, first of all, honestly, the Daughters of Bilitis was not a radical organization. Their purpose was to help women come out and to support lesbians in finding partners, finding friends, supporting them when they had to come out to their parents or to anyone else, and to also work on basic things like employment, housing, and discrimination in all aspects, because back then that was what was going on. It was very, very difficult in the 70s to be a lesbian, and I just wrote these things down because I just wanted to make sure that you knew these. Many parts of the United States were still criminalizing consensual same-sex relations in the early 70s. You could still be arrested at bars simply for being present, and they could arrest you for vagrancy and disorderly conduct, or for dancing with the same sex. Lesbians were limited and had no legal recourse to fight discrimination. Until the 1980s, protection for LGBT rights at state or national level was virtually non-existent. Lois and Sherry, particularly Lois being president, she felt that that they should have bylaws to this organization, that they needed officers, president, vice president, things like that. Whereas there were other organizations that were more radical and they were more collectives. But Lois went this route, and her purpose was more along the lines of supporting the lesbian in those respects, like just being there, supportive of everyone. They also, a lot of the organizations back then had, their finances were terrible, but they would come up with fundraisers and all kinds of things to raise money. So there was a strong leadership in DOB, mainly Lois, but there was also a committed group of volunteers that helped with running things. They had things like the library. They had a wonderful library there that no one else had, of lesbian books and lesbian authors. So their main goal was to strengthen people's self-esteem and self-realization of members. So Lois was the president and she was running it, but if someone came up to her and said, "I'd like to do this," she'd say, "Yeah, that's great, you do it." So she wanted them to advance. She wanted them to become leaders themselves, and they did. There were a lot of women that came out of there and they went on to lead other things. So, yeah.
That's great. That's really great background, I feel like, both on the organization, also just kind of historically as well. But I'd love to hear more about your experience making the book and everything coming together. So did you have any particularly memorable interviews?
Oh, yes. Well, that was the best part of the book. The written part is good. I'm glad it's there, but the best part was the interviews. So I've got some pictures here of some of the people I interviewed.
No, not so well. Can you use the mic
Oh, yeah,
closer?
Can you pass this on?
yeah. This woman is Mary Mumford, and these are some of the things that she talked about. Growing up, I had this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach that I might be gay. I thought, I cannot be that. That means I'm weird. I'm a freak or something. I was a tomboy when I was young. Mother wanted me to wear frilly dresses, and I would refuse to do that and wore pants and t-shirts, much to her horror. I was not accepted by the family. I didn't hear the word lesbian until I was 13 and knew right away what it was, and it terrified me. My mother heard me talking on the phone to this girl I had a huge crush on. I was so crazy about her. I was telling her I loved her. My mother came storming up the stairs and said, "You're a freak." I mean, it's, insane, but anyway. Mary grew up in Virginia, and she couldn't wait to get out of there. And she went to college in Virginia, but then she went to New York and Boston, and she was still fighting the idea of her being a lesbian. She was still fighting not to come out. But she went to Tufts, and then she got married. And she said, that would definitely prove I wasn't gay. I had a wonderful straight friend who went to one of the first gay prides. She told me about it. I went to the next one and watched from a distance. Then I started going and I felt comfortable. In the early 80s, I couldn't find any gay people. I read about DOB in the gay community news. I sort of snuck in. Lo and behold, I was amazed at all the wonderful people there. It took me many years. I had to deal with my own internalized homophobia, which was huge. It helped me to be with other lesbians who didn't have three heads and were just like me. So it made an incredible difference in her life. This woman, this was one of the best interviews I've ever had. This is Anne McGuire. She died about 15 months ago. Anne McGuire was an icon in the gay community. When Lois and I interviewed her, at the end of the interview, I said, it's a privilege to be in the same room with you. And she said, oh, never mind about me, tell me about yourself. That was the kind of person she was. She came out in a bar, a gay bar in Worcester. She grew up in Worcester, and she was fortunate to have parents who were accepting. She was a little nervous about telling them, but they were always they were encouraging her because they knew she was a lesbian. She left Worcester and she went into Boston, and she became, the first thing that she did, I think, it was a program on WBUR called Gay Way. And she would take calls from people, and they would be calling about something that they were having to deal with, and she would talk to them and give them advice. A lot of people would not call in because they were afraid somebody would recognize their voice. So after the call-in, during the program, she'd say, anybody who wants to call me afterward, I'll be around for a few minutes. And that's when that's when she got a lot of the calls, was after the show was over. Anne went on to become the gay liaison to Mayor Flynn, which was totally amazing, if anybody remembers Ray Flynn. But she got him to march up a little bit of the gay pride parade, which was amazing. Then she became the gay liaison to Mayor Menino. And Mayor Menino really, she and Mayor Menino really got along, and she became his Health and Human Services Secretary. She also was, she was one of the founders of the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there were so many things that she did. She ended up doing a lot of work in Provincetown for poor women who couldn't, they'd been chambermaids in the motels down in P-Town and stuff. And she made sure that they got groceries, that they got rides to the doctor, that kind of thing. She never stopped. She was an amazing woman. And, what's wonderful about DOB is that all these stories are totally unique. They are just incredible stories. And we have people like Ann McGuire, and we have Donna Dimmick, who's on the left. And she was a worker in an electronics factory. And she found her partner who was working there in the electronics factory. And this is amazing. She and her partner Dottie lived with her parents, and Donna had a child, and so the parents must have known. They didn't really say anything, but they lived with them because they couldn't afford anything else, and they finally moved out. But this says something right here, because there's Donna, and then next to her is her daughter Beth, and then Beth's wife Katie, and there's Dottie, Donna's partner. And so this is at Beth and Katie's wedding in 2010. So there's history right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's great.
I feel like with every story you tell, I'm like, okay, we could have a whole night dedicated to Anne McGuire. We could really dig in on this multiple generations of lesbians. That's awesome, and I'm really glad that you got to have those conversations with everyone, and that we get to read them too. Hearing more about the rap groups that they would hold, like these discussions where everyone could go and chit-chat with different themes or topics. Was there a rap group that you wish you could have attended at the time?
Well, yeah, there were a few of them. I didn't go to DOB. I was actually living in Arlington, and I wanted, we had to live in Arlington because my partner didn't want to live in the city. And she didn't want anybody to know that we were together, because she was afraid she was going to lose her job. She was a social worker. I was afraid I was going to lose my job because I was a Montessori teacher. So we kind of were under the radar. But some of the raps were they were really wonderful. I think that was the core of DOB, were the raps. People would come, and a lot of women would come. They'd drive their car. I had more stories telling me about driving around the old Cambridge Baptist Church a few times. You know, first of all, there's no place to park. But secondly, should I go in? What am I going to do? I don't know if I can do this, whatever. And then they would walk, I call it the 20 steps to freedom. They'd walk up 20 steps, and on the second floor of the OCBC or the RAPS in the office, and they would go into the RAPS, and people could just be themselves. And, you know, it was just a really wonderful thing. They had RAPS for, one of the RAPS that they had was for lesbian mothers and co-parents, because at that time, lesbian mothers were considered unfit, and the fathers would get the children if they divorced. So there was a lot of legal things that they had to deal with. They had groups for women under 35 and older women over 35. They were older. You know, singles, couples, all kinds of raps. I would have enjoyed any of them, I think. Yeah, it was really good.
Off the record, the attractions to unavailable women's rap caught my eye. I was like, oh, interesting. Would have been nice. I imagine it was difficult to continue working on the project after Lois Johnson passed away. I know you alluded to her earlier, but I was wondering, were there any guiding principles that she had that kind of helped you finish the project or motivate you throughout those years?
Well,
yeah, of course.
There's one thing that Lois said to me in her interview that I did with her, and I just have to find it. For me, the most important thing was that we navigated the waters by appealing to the human part, which is to protect and save those women who are being persecuted by society, and to do it in the best way we could. We were not equipped to be radical lesbians lying in the street in front of the bus. We were equipped to bring love, to bring respect, equality, and friendship to people, and that was our radical mode of operation. That's what the organization was about. In my opinion, it wasn't always that way. It had its problems, it had its people fighting with one another, but that didn't happen all the time. You've got two human beings in the same room. You might have friction, but you're also going to have harmony if you use your mind, your head, and your heart. Most of all, use your heart, because this is what that organization did for people. It enabled lesbians to respect themselves, to love one another, and to come out from the shadows where we did not belong. All those women received love. Love is liberation. And I certainly felt all the time that I was with Lois that she loved me and I loved her. And I will never forget her. She gave me such an incredible opportunity. And every time I would be driving myself crazy, trying to get the tech right and doing this and doing that, putting the book together, I would think about Lois, and I'm just so grateful that I was given this opportunity to be with such an incredible person.
That's wonderful. I was just wondering, for a final question, what advice you might have for kind of some of the people in this room, or some people my age, who I like to refer to as the granddaughters of Paulides. Have any words of wisdom for us?
Just by being here tonight, it's really wonderful that you're here, because you want to know the history of the lesbian movement, the lesbians in Boston, and you want to know your history, because if you don't know your history, you don't really have a North Star, You really have to know it. And I'm just so grateful to all of you for being here. It's wonderful. And so just keep on learning about the history, and it will help you to go forward.
Thank you, that's great. I'm also going to give you some water, because I feel like you've
Oh,
been chatting for a while. That's wonderful. I was also going to give everyone an opportunity to kind of stretch their legs or go to the bathroom while we take some questions, and then Sarah's going to have a conversation with her good friend Mary over here, who has graciously offered to chat with us. So yeah, feel free to first of all, thank you to Sarah. I know, yeah. Did anyone have any questions?
Yeah. So first of all, I read your book, and it was great, so thanks for writing it. I noticed in the book, you said that, part of the reason that Daughters of Paulides disbanded was because more women were coming out and they could have more niche groups. So it's I don't want to have the Greater Boston social group. I want to have my, political activist group. I want to have my Nantucket group. But now, it doesn't seem like we have those groups anymore. And the woman that you were interviewed, I noticed a lot of them were I wish we still had Daughters of Paulides. So I was kind of wondering, from your perspective, do you think we should, it failed because people didn't want a general social group, but do you think maybe we should have a general social group, or maybe there was something wrong with those smaller groups, like it was just that they didn't have like a right leader, but that was still the right way to go? I don't know if you had an opinion based on your interviews.
Well, so you're saying there's no more, there aren't any lesbian groups?
Well, I'm not really aware of them. Maybe you're
Yeah.
aware of them, but I'm not really aware of the, like, well, I contacted a woman near me, and she was like, no, I'm not aware of anything near us. Like, everyone's just kind of busy. And people in the book, they also mentioned, oh, we were like so busy, so we couldn't like keep it up anymore. And everybody I know, they're busy right now. So I'm like, but they managed to keep up Daughters of Blightus before, even though they're all busy. So I'm just kind of like.
Well, just to let you know that they tried starting the Daughters of Blightus at the Women's Center in Cambridge again, and it just didn't go.
Yeah.
But that, if you look at what's going on today, I do think that it would be much better if people could get together and form groups, political groups, social groups. I think people really have to stand up to what's going on. I mean, Bagley they're very strong, and so my thought would be that it would be much better if you were in groups. Yeah.
I feel like even to what you're saying about like the idea of moving to Boston and having like, oh, go to the Daughters of Blightus, just kind of this like orientation catch-all of like welcome before you can find out about like the other niche, like, well, we go hiking on Saturdays kind of thing. I feel like it's definitely.
What you're doing, right?
No. But I get what you're saying. That totally makes sense. Yeah. Was there another hand I saw?
I just wanted to, Sarah, what happened to the wonderful library that the Daughters of Blightus had? You mentioned.
That's a
I
very
had the
good
same
question.
question.
I have no idea. You would ask
I
that
would ask that
question.
question.
I have a feeling that the Phantom Librarian probably took many of those books back with her.
Is she still among us?
She's among us, but she's living in another state. So they probably went with her.
Oh yeah, Sam. I was just wondering, from the perspective of somebody who does oral histories, like, what do you think it takes to get a good oral history out of somebody? Do you think that people naturally just like want to tell their story and they have what it takes to like kind of articulate it, or do you think it's something that you kind of have to artfully pull out of people sometimes? I don't know. I was just curious about that process.
Well, most of my oral histories were with people in the Cambridge neighborhoods. They were not with professors from Harvard or the latest celebrity. So for me, that's where I'm at, is to be with folks that are just regular, down to earth. And to be honest with you, there was only one person that I interviewed, and I did about 650 interviews in Cambridge. One person who said, ask me a question, ask me a question. If you're there and you're sympathetic, or you're not threatening, you just ask a question. Yeah, there's a whole background to what you're doing, but if you approach people with the right, you're just sitting with them. You're not putting them on the spot. You will get an incredible interview. I mean, it's amazing. You don't really have to. You do have to listen. Most of us can't listen. Let's face it. Deep listening. You've got to be a deep listener. Yeah. But it's so worth it.
I was going to say, speaking of oral histories, I feel like we might get a little live oral history demonstration from you and our good friend Mary here. Did you want to introduce her while I pass things out?
One of the people I interviewed for this book is with us tonight. Her name is Mary Leno, and I am proud to call Mary Leno my friend. And Mary, we're gonna just have a conversation, okay?
Well, I've been a great listener tonight. I think we can all go home. Happily. Thank you.
So,
Perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna hand these out
Okay.
for some. Everyone can take home a little bit about Mary.
Oh, I'd like to meet her.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Of course. Yeah.
so Mary,
Yeah, I'm here. I'm thinking, oh, well, we can all go home now with a story.
so Mary, where did you grow up?
Well, right here it says Ipswich. And that's where I grew up.
Okay, nice town, isn't it?
Nice town, but at the time I grew up, it was a very Protestant town and Catholic town, and we all obeyed our church mandates. So it was not an easy town to grow up in as a lesbian.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What happened?
I didn't use the mic. Give you the mic.
You need to hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I just said it was hard to grow up in Ipswich. It was a little too religious. The town was, but that was the era, the 40s, 50s. Yeah, I think it was much more religious. People that, Sundays was a real important day in my town.
So to speak.
So, what was your family like?
My family was a piece of work, so I don't want to get into describing my mother or my father or my brother.
Right.
But I was an unhappy child, not just because I knew I was different, but it was not a pleasant, peaceful growing up. So that's
The answer to that.
Mary, when did you start having feelings for girls and women?
Well, I'll say that one example was the babysitter. I know my brother really liked the babysitter and was happy to talk about it. And I really liked the babysitter, and I thought I shouldn't talk about it. So I don't know where I got that. I was a young kid when I thought I put the cap on my sense of being free to talk about it.
So, your brother was kind of he was a wild one, wasn't he?
That's mild. But anyway,
So he was a wild one, and your mother did not want you to go to the same school as your brother, right?
Small town, and my mother thought that the Leno name was wasted because of my brother's behavior. So she sent me off to a Catholic school in Salem, which meant I had to take the train, take the bus, but fortunately there were a couple of kids from Ipswich that we could share that ride every day. But it was a Catholic school, and to be continued.
It was a Catholic school, but you managed to do something there at the Catholic school, didn't you?
Oh my, what a great setup that was. So I had a crush in my freshman year, and we would hold hands and kiss, and unfortunately it didn't end well. It ended mysteriously. She didn't come back to school the following year, and I tried to be in touch with her, but it didn't work. So it's always been a mystery. I suspect her mother felt like we were spending too much time together on the phone or just talking. And I have always felt bad about it. But we did kissing and hugging and holding hands, and we spent every afternoon of school together until my train came. So it was a nice year together.
Love that story. Anyway, so you went on to Catholic college. You never learned, did you, Mary?
Well, in terms, I was never a good student. And I said to my friend who, senior in high school, who was a good student, she asked me, what's going to happen to you next year? I said, I don't know. She said, why don't you think about college? And I said, I don't think a college would accept me. And she said, well, I never did the SATs, or was that the test back then? She said, oh, I can find a college that didn't do an SATs. So she did, and it was a Catholic college in Nashua, New Hampshire. So I went there, and of course I had crushes on different women, but I actually came out in my senior year. We spent the senior year not studying very much. I'll say that.
And after college, you went to Kansas, right? Yeah, tell us about that.
After college, somebody said to me, what are you going to do next year? And this was during the day, I think it was President Johnson and President Kennedy, if you remember those years, or you heard about them at least. I knew I wanted to join the Peace Corps, which I thought was very exciting, but you had to have the ability to learn a new language, and I didn't, and still don't have that ability. I do know bonjour, but that's the extent of my bilingual. So, in lieu of that, I didn't know what I wanted to do after college. And 3 priests came about at different colleges. The college I went to was in Nashua, New Hampshire. And these priests went through New Hampshire, stopping at different Catholic colleges. And they were trying to recruit people for 1 year to go to the Midwest. This particular recruit was for Kansas, which I had not gone much beyond Maine. But I thought, well, why not? So the job was to do a inventory. Anybody who showed some interest in the Catholic Church, they got a call. And so in rural Kansas, we would make contact with different people. I don't think we converted anybody for the year. But during that year, there was another woman, and of course I had a crush on her. So that made the year exciting. However, she was straight, and we still are in touch, but it didn't work out quite what I had in mind.
So then, Mary, after your trip to Kansas, you went to graduate school. And I know it's hard to get there, but you went to another Catholic school, graduate school. I say this because I'm Catholic, or I was. So you went to, where did you go, Mary?
So I was, at the end of the year, my friend Trudy said to me, so what are you going to do next year? I said, I don't know. What are you going to do? She said, well, I'm going to go to social work school in Washington, D.C., where she was from. So I said, well, I don't know what I could do. And she said, well, why don't you go to this school in Boston, the BC, Boston College School, which had a social work joint part to it. So I said, I don't think they would take me. She said, I can help you. So they did accept me. I should say, all my life I was accepted in different schools on condition. I don't know if you know that term, maybe they don't use it anymore, but I spent my life on condition So they accepted me on condition at Boston College.
It might have been on condition that you got an MSW from BC. And where did you go? You took a job down in the South End. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So, as a student, I connected to the Social Works magazine that came out that just talked to social workers. And there was an ad, are you tired of the traditional social work? Like, I was so tired of Freud, I can't explain it. So I answered the ad. It was a special program from, I think, the Department of Transportation or something that was interested in alcoholism and something else. So I applied for the job and got it, and I don't know if any of you know or heard about the South End, which in those years, in the 60s, was really a rundown area. And there were a lot of alcoholics who were street people. And our job was to sort of let them know that we would be interested if they ever wanted to go to Bridgewater. That was the prison, but Bridgewater also offered drying out. So they would come into our office, I would interview them. If they wanted to go to Bridgewater, I would arrange the interviews. And that went well. And also, these men would get some kind of federal money, and they would stay in these houses that had women who took care of the women who really took care of the men. They would take their 2-week rent money, and they would save it and offer it out to men on a daily basis, so that the men would have the money that they would get through the month, that they could pay the rent and do whatever drinking they wanted. And we were offering, the Massachusetts had alcoholism clinics back then. I don't know if they still do, but we would offer that kind of help to the men who would, and women who would come into the offices that we had. Is that too rambling?
So you were, at that point, you were living in Roxbury at Norfolk House, right? And you met somebody there.
So I struggled with feeling like I preferred women, but it was a mortal sin, and it was this and that, and it just was not, nobody came out during those years that I was aware of, or even how to come out. And
Someone you met.
Someone you met. Yeah, the man.
oh, so the Norfolk house that I lived in was a settlement house in Roxbury, and it was offering, students could live in the settlement house if they would offer their skills to different programming within the Norfolk house. And so one of the residents was a guy, and we started going out. And we went out for about 1.5 years, but I felt guilty because I still did not connect with him. I was in therapy to try and be straight, which was my only alternative. And the therapist would encourage me to continue dating. And I said, you know, I'm really uptight about this. I don't feel right about it. And he suggested I have a few drinks. And I thought, if that's going to relax me and if I could change my ways. So I developed a drinking problem. I'm not blaming him. I developed it. But it was a terrible time to have these feelings and feel like you have no choice but to try and change. So eventually, I sort of parted ways with him, but I have always felt guilty about that I wasn't honest in the relationship. So it's not really resolved for me. he was a good guy. And I hope he's happy with kids.
Mary, in 1969, there was Stonewall and the uprising, and you want to talk about your reaction to it?
I had no idea that there were lesbians and gay people out there to change the history or the reputation of us. When I heard about Stonewall, which I hope all of you know, I thought, this is for me to finally feel good about myself and to want to get involved in it. And it changed my life, and I know a lot of lesbians. It really has made my life wonderful.
So around that time, you moved to Cambridge, and you started going to DOB? You went to some of the activities and the wraps there, and Thanksgiving, nice things, and then you went to the Women's Center. And what did you find at the Women's Center?
I don't know if you know about the Women's Center, but it was one of the first women's centers in Massachusetts, if not the country. And it came about as a takeover of women taking a building, a downright old building at Harvard, taking over the building, asking that there be a women's center. And the takeover lasted a long time. And I secretly went down and watched the takeover. I didn't feel, I was still social work. I didn't feel safe enough to come out, but I was inspired by it. And once the Women's Center got established here in Cambridge, I got involved in it. I joined a women's group, came out. I also, as part of the Women's Center, there was the women's school. Speaking of never being good at school, I was excited about women in school. So I loved the women's school. I took a lot of classes and I gave a few here and there. And the women's school was sort of like non-traditional. You could learn about how to oil your car. But it also taught about the classics of lesbian women. I was really excited. So that was part of.
So you were in a consciousness raising group also at the Women's Center, right?
Right.
And what happened in that? There was a party or something you went to?
We're leading up to a lesbian relationship. And here's the story. So I was in the consciousness raising group for a long time, and one of the women in the group always had a holiday festival get together. And so she invited the group to the party. It was in Framingham. And I met somebody there that I liked a lot, and I called her one night and I asked her if she would like to go nude swimming in Cambridge at the YWCA. She said yes. So I can't even believe it because I'm so modest, actually. So we ended up getting together for 29 years or something, no, 19 years, and it was a hell of a good swim.
The other thing that maybe you could talk a little bit about, Mary.
It would be a little bit.
Okay, it'll be a little bit. Is about your collection that you have had for many, many years, from like the 1970s on, some photographs. You want to talk about that?
when I lived in Roxbury, there was a lot of graffiti around, and I was really touched by the graffiti, touched and appalled by it. And I started to take pictures of graffiti. And there was also shocking stuff. There was a lot of racism back then on people's abandoned walls and buildings. So I got excited about graffiti, and that also moved on to collecting buttons about anything connected with change and the GBLT stuff. And now, am I on to something else? Oh, I go to demonstrations now and take pictures of people's signs. And I love it because it's all ages of people who go and demonstrate that they're not happy with what the country's doing and what we've come to. I used to be a proud person, but now I'm like embarrassed that this is the country I live in. And I'm hoping that I can find a place to take these photographs so that 5 or 6 years from now, people will see that we really were excited about what's happening and we wanted change. We didn't like what we had become.
Thank you very much, Mary. Great evening.
Thank you again to Sarah and Mary. Just another hand of applause real quick. And so there are some of the photographs that Mary was talking about in the little booklets that you can take home. Yeah. If you weren't already taking notes on some of the naked swimming, that's a good, well, I'm gonna use that, thank you.
Worked out for me.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. Did you have any questions for Mary or Sarah at this point in the evening?
This might be a little bit specific to me, but I know there's a couple of magazines that you mentioned in the book, and I was just wondering if there were any other pieces of literature from like the 70s or the 80s that really made like an impact on you and like your journey as a lesbian.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there are a lot of books. I'm not sure. I think that there's a bibliography, and a lot of the books that I did a lot of research on are listed in those. Off the top of my head, well, there's Off Our Backs. That was a magazine. Trying to think. What else? Sojourner, right? Sojourner was right from Cambridge.
Mother Curry.
Anybody else? Mary?
No. Gay Community News.
Gay Community News, oh my God, yeah. Have you been to the History Project? You've been to that, and have you looked at their archives?
A little bit, but not a lot.
And you could go online with them too. They have a rich collection of many things. So, yeah, a lot of oral histories, and other material.
Any other questions?
It's kind of similar to my previous question, but so now you have a friend group of lesbians. Are you like, this is where I want to be right now? Or are you like, I wish we had Daughters of Politis still. I wish I was going out to see more lesbians. I'm just curious how you feel about your social life now versus before. And were you, both of you,
You all lesed out, or you?
That's a great question. That's the hit of the night.
Well, I've tried to talk Mary into going to Danny's bar.
I don't even know about it.
Yes, you do. I
Where are we
think.
going?
Not like the Saints, Mary, let's just say.
Yeah, okay, I get it. I miss the Saints.
Yeah.
For those not familiar with the Saints, that's a previous lesbian bar here in Boston, which you might be reading about next month in the next month's Lesbos if you're not signed up for our newsletter. That's the only plug I'll do of it, though.
It was also somewhere else.
Yeah.
That was, and Ann McGuire ran that. She managed that for a few years. It was really good. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mary, you mentioned that Stonewall changed your life. I would imagine it did for most of you. I was just wondering, like, kind of what the immediate aftermath was, like maybe how you heard about it, and kind of the reaction within like your other lesbian friends, and just kind of like, yeah, how really that changed things for you.
Gee, I don't know where to go with this. Can you help me?
Well,
How did you hear about Stonewall, Mary? Remember?
I think I heard about it on TV and then the GCN and on and on. I heard a lot about it. And the radio covered it.
Yeah.
But I'm not answering your question.
What you're saying is interesting. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier that it showed you that there were people like you who were fighting, so like the world would change instead of you having to change.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
just-
I'm
I just wanted
agreeing
to
with you.
understand other comments.
Is there something I can add to it?
Like, how did lesbian organizing change after that, maybe?
Well, let's ask Kathy Hoffman. She's a pretty good expert on these things.
I think you've got a whole table full of people.
Well, but I'm asking you to help me.
More than happy to. Mary and I had a lot of great years at the women's school, which was classes, like 8 weeks of classes. You paid $5. We did a night of childcare in someone's home. And it was everything from the politics of lesbianism to Marxism. It was a decidedly progressive school. And this is in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, and Mary was on the collective too, when there was no women's studies. But between that, the women's school was also this incredible orientation, like you're saying, like how do you meet people? I mean, taking a class at the women's school, did you all take classes at the women's school? Yeah. So it's like you took a class with other women, and it was like a way to sort of easily meet people and check each other out. But we also, I mean, we had lesbian softball then, and, but I think Stonewall also was really, that's why I was interested in your connecting to it, Mary, because, I mean, I'm a little bit younger than you, enough that it mattered in those days, and I feel like it was a lot more men who were impacted by Stonewall, because it was much more of a gay male bar and a place for trans people, you know, who really fought those police. So.
Well, it was trans women of color
Right.
who were behind that uprising, and they're the ones.
Say it
that-
right into the mic, 'cause that's important.
It was trans women of color who really,
Marsha P. Johnson.
Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were behind the whole uprising, and they were really important figures.
So, guys, just a follow-up question that whoever wants to answer. Was the lesbian community in the 70s, 80s very kind of lesbian women? Was there connection with gay men's groups or overall kind of LGBTQ community? Or was yeah?
You wanna say, repeat the question? Partly.
Yeah, I was just going to repeat the question into the mic, so sorry to go. Just asking about the relationships between the lesbian and gay male groups at the time in the 70s and 80s, what that was like.
Well, I want to talk about AIDS, which we should mention, and the lesbians were really involved in AIDS survey.
I forget about that. But AIDS is an important part of our history, and lesbians were very involved in trying to do whatever that we could fit into the AIDS help.
It's one of the places we bridged, I would say, between lesbians and gay men, because really, the most important thing about being lesbians in the 70s and 80s was being women, because it was the beginning of the women's movement.
Yeah.
And women's consciousness, and women's music, and women's organizing, and in Cambridge, as Mary was part of too, the first battered women's shelter started by 2 women from here, the first feminist health center that we created for ourselves. I mean, all of these projects came out of the exclusion of women. From New Words bookstore, women's bookstore. So a lot of that were lesbians within that scene as of this vibrant women's movement.
And Gay Community News is lesbians and gay men working together.
Right, always, that's right.
And that ran for a long time, very strong paper, fabulous.
Yeah. And we were also activists. We were anti-militarist activists. We were solidarity activists.
Vietnam.
We were anti-war activists. I mean, a lot of those movements, Central America, etc., around here, those of us in the leadership were lesbians. But we saw our identity as really being about wanting to create a world that works for everybody. So, right, Mary? Great.
Okay. I was just thinking about what you just said and thinking about the idea that like lesbianism and being a lesbian and being queer is like inherently political, and I think that there are a lot of people now that take that and have tried to separate that out from themselves. And so the history of like being really involved in anti-war protesting or being really involved in the AIDS crisis or all these things, and like I've met in my lifetime, especially older lesbians who like consider themselves Republicans and consider themselves to be aligned more with the right. And so I think that there's an interesting conversation about people separating their political views from their identity, and I just wonder if you had anything to say about that relationship, and if that's something newer that you see, or if that's something that you haven't seen, or I was just curious. Sorry, that's like a really loaded question. But
Sarah, what's your experience with that?
What?
What's your experience with the sense now of we have military lesbians, we have Republican lesbians, we have MAGA lesbians, like, and on the left we have people disappearing lesbians, so that's a whole other thing.
I know one thing that we need to do.
Right.
I know one thing that we need to do is to be able to sit down with anyone and listen to them, like I'm talking about deep listening, and listen to them and not necessarily support what they're saying, but at least listen to them so that we can find common ground. Now, maybe people think that's, out there someplace and it's not gonna happen, but as long as we keep ourselves away from people who disagree with us, we're not gonna get anywhere. And I really feel like that's what we need to do.
Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, in some ways, right, it's like the success of lesbian presence is, we have lesbian Republicans. But at the same time, we're in a period now from the right of attacks on being lesbian and gay. And so some of those people, I think, a lot of gay men were not political before AIDS, let's just say. Lesbians were always political in some ways, but gay men not so much. And then with AIDS and people dying, all of a sudden, silence equals death. People were out in the streets. And then we made progress, right? And we made progress. And we had gay pride marches with corporations and, you know, all these, what is this? Gay pride used to be a protest, a celebratory one in drag, to be sure, but, and then it got very mainstream. And now this year, right, for the first time, the corporations like weren't there because of the administration. So I just think, you know, being gay in a world that doesn't like gay people is an opening for political consciousness raising. And as Sarah says, like, we gotta be open to that and listen and stay connected.
Yeah.
Maybe we have one more question.
Oh, I was just wondering where, for the folks at the tables, like where y'all hang out now. Like, Mary, maybe
I
not
think
the
we
swimming
should
pool.
start hanging out here,
Yeah.
really.
That's a great idea.
We can talk about it.
We know where you are,
Who's
but
at your table, Mary?
yeah.
Who's at your table?
Like, who do you hang out with? Where do you get your community now that you don't have women's school? You don't have these beautiful things.
Well, right here.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
You can join us.
This bunch of old women, we're our community.
Yeah. Do you have like the same connection to being out in the community doing things? Is it similar as like your community changes? Like, do you find ways to connect with younger people in your queer community, or like where do you branch
No,
out?
I can't say that I do find connections for younger people.
Yeah.
So that's a loss that we have, or a lack at least.
The Cambridge LGBT Commission does intergenerational dinners. They do a few a year. So if you get on that list, and you
called
can come
SAGE.
get a free dinner and meet a few elders,
Cool.
men and women mixed. Yeah.
Thank you.
I know I
We had a
said
lot
I
of
would.
fun
Oh.
last time with that. It was-
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
Sarah
was
was there
great.
too.
I went to the first one.
I was gonna say, I know we already did my plug, but with the Lesbos newsletter, we've also been trying to have lesbians from different generations getting coffee together. So if any of you guys are interested, anyone here in signing up on that, we have an interest form, and don't worry, we pay for the coffee and a pastry if we're really feeling it. But trying to do that similar thing of creating those connections. Sorry.
Oh, I can make a pitch for the Lesbians and Friends Dance, sponsored by the Mass Breast Cancer Coalition, which Ann McGuire founded many years ago. I'm on the board, and it's going to be the last Saturday in October. And this year, the elders are coming for the first 2 hours, and then it's a Halloween costume dance for $20 up to 11 o'clock. So if you can just Google Mass Breast Cancer Coalition, you'll find info about the dance, and that's a room full of dice. And friends.
Almost as good as Mary's pool.
Well, thank you all so much for being here, and it was so wonderful to see this kind of turn more into just a conversation at the end. That's such a dream. So thank you all for, as Sarah says, deep listening and being such attentive guests. Feel free, if you haven't maybe gotten your book signed, do you have a pen? We can have a little book sign moment. And then if you don't have a free coloring book or a free little book about Mary, come see me. I also have buttons in that little jar there, little DOB buttons that I made this morning. So please take one of those. And thank you guys so much for coming here. And thank you most of all to Cafe Zing for hosting us and being so gracious. They were amazing. I just emailed saying that we needed a space, and they're like, oh, that's the exact kind of event we're trying to have here. So thank you so much to Cafe Zing. And if you haven't already grabbed something from them, yeah, do so. Thank you guys.
Do you want me to, if I pause the recording?
Oh, yeah.